how to approach implementing an NHI program.
Thank you, Lalit. Thank you, everyone. My name is Alejandro Leal. I'm a senior analyst here at Kuppinger, and today I will be moderating this distinguished panel. Happy to be here. And first, we'll start maybe with some questions, and then it's going to last for 30 minutes. Perhaps in the last 5 minutes, we can open the floor for questions. I'd like to keep this engaging, so you can all ask anything if needed. So maybe the first question would be, well, first, I think you should introduce yourselves. So, first, Martin.
Hi, my name is Martin Sandren. I'm the product lead for Identity and Access at Ikea. So I do raw meatballs and flat packages.
Hi there, my name is Alon Jackson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Astrix Security. We do not human identity.
My name is Stephanus Reiger. I'm from BMW. I'm responsible for authentication systems at BMW.
Okay, we only have one mic, so I'll just be passing it around. So maybe the first question, great, thanks, would be, the title of this session is how to implement an NHI program. So maybe we can start first with the misconceptions. What are the not to do things when it comes to implementing an NHI program? Maybe we can start first with Martin.
So I think the first part of this is, do you want to implement an NHI program, or do you want to attach the work into another business transformation? So if you look at it, Zero Trust has been one of the few cases where actually a technological or architectural change has actually been driving programs. So if you look at many big enterprises, they have Zero Trust programs. But most of the time, it's you kind of, to be successful, need to motivate the business. Why should the business give you the money to do this work? By connecting it to something that actually delivers tangible business value, that makes it possible to do something that you can't really do in the current system.
I think, first of all, that's a good point. Maybe kind of taking it along the same way of existing processes, right? So Zero Trust obviously is a big initiative. It's not a technology, right? It's not one program. It's a kind of state of mind, maybe. But attaching everything non-human identity with processes we already have for onboarding, offboarding users, right? Looking at least privileges, looking at anomaly detection, right? And kind of tying together, right? The abilities to do this not only for users, but also for the non-user side of the house, and streamlining really our processes so we can see everything in the same way. And for instance, when someone leaves the organization, right? Are we also revoking all the credentials, the services, right? That same person created and used along the time of his work, as one example of a process that we want to attach together.
Okay, I guess let's start a little bit from a different perspective. What is a non-HI program? I do not know what a non-HI is, because we all started on a very simple part where we said, okay, we have a lot of identities in there, we're using them for different purposes. So we started with standard identity, such like that. My identity, I got some privileges and I can deal with that. Then we said, okay, we have some other ones, we would like to use it for APIs, so I'm going to create a technical identity. And the technical identity, I'm going to treat it a similar way, and I would do it with my human identity. This is working out for a couple of times, and then we figure out that this non-human identity got shared. So a lot of APIs are using the same identity. And then someone came to the brilliant idea to change the password. Okay, now we have an issue. A lot of APIs won't work any longer. Okay, so we thought about that. How do you want to do like that? So you set up, the first thing is rotating passwords for everyone. And then you may be creating machine-to-machine identities where you say, okay, each and every client should have its own identity. So that something like a broad outage of several IPAs is not happening any longer. And then the next step comes in there. Internet of Things. Another thing, a completely different identity that you need to deal with. And it's working completely different. It's nothing that you're going to share with your identity management on the first glance. You're first going to get it as a machine that is somewhere hosted in the network, where you maybe give it a certificate and then you try to use it. And then you figure out it needs also responsibilities and roles. And you're going to integrate it in your existing systems. And now the next big deal is coming up. You have an artificial intelligence. Wow, how would this thing work? And I guess we're going to start with the next part of the discussion.
Thank you. Today we've been talking a lot about non-human identities. It's a big topic, and we know that the problem has been there for a while. But in a way, it's a sort of paradigm shift. As you said, it's like a state of mind. So the question would be, how should organizations implement an NHI program? Is it similar to Zero Trust, or should the NHI program be sort of incorporated to other initiatives within the organization? Any thoughts on that?
So I think it's about the culture of the organization and how are you successful. There are organizations that have a very strong architectural culture where you do go out and lift the platform's abilities to execute business functionality. There are organizations where if you don't have a business case, forget about it. And of course you can wait until the auditors comes in and puts your audit finding on it. That sometimes it works. You can also wait until the cybersecurity insurance says that, well, are you in control of your NHIs? And if you're not, well, that's good. Here's another 10 million euros in insurance premium for your cybersecurity insurance. So I think that is kind of the challenge, and you need to know your organization and how it kind of works from a culture perspective. And that will tell you how you best put your NHI program into place.
Let's bring you in. Who of you already have a program for NHI? Yeah, we found 2. 3. And I guess here is the issue. The first is you get to have the awareness that something like that is maybe necessary. Now you're going to treat it. If you did like an initiative, or if you can integrate it into your standard doings and just focus on that specifically and trying to set up solutions for that, I guess this is a decision that you have to take out of your organization. But what you can't do is ignoring it.
I think continuing on this, we're seeing 2 kind of scenarios across the market. One is enterprises who already, obviously service account is a problem that we had for a while. It's not a new issue. And obviously the new issue, the most interesting non-human identities these days are the artificial identities, right? AI. So one is organizations that are using different co-pilots or OpenAI, right? Different kind of technologies, especially around call centers is a big kind of first use case where we're seeing a lot of them. But also just every one of us are using different AI tools today to help us write emails, help us take meeting notes, help us write code. It's kind of getting everywhere. So one is, okay, we've got all this, right? How do we control it? How do we manage it? How do we verify? What kind of access does it have? Do we have a human that owns every non-human, right? In terms of accountability, ownership, lifecycle management, and stuff like that. Are we able to rotate the keys, right? In case something happens, or just regularly, right? Can we audit what kind of actions are these AI, and not just AI, right? Any kind of service is performing on our behalf. So these are some, questions that one type of customers will have. Another type is actually organizations that, before they adopt, right? They want to say, okay, we want to use this new technology. Let's see how can we provision it from the get-go in a more secure way. So obviously, it depends really on the risk appetite and the speed of the business to go and adopt, right? If security kind of comes, as a second step, which is actually most of the cases, right? Or if it comes as, the initial initiative for introducing new technology.
Thank you for that. There's a lot of people in this room, each of them representing an organization. Do you think that they should be looking for NHI capabilities within the products they're already using, or should they look for a best-of-breed solution?
I guess this is not that easy to answer because how you're starting, you just described it. First, what you're doing is you're trying to start with an, let's say, OpenAI. We're going to say, okay, well, let's search for someone who is presenting the email response for me and taking out that information just from the internet. So you're not taking care of specific information that you're going to have in your organization. But then it's going to increase. The more and more you're using artificial intelligence, then it is limited to the information that you have to share with your organization and that you're going to take from your organization. And with this part, you're more in that you have to take care of what am I allowing in artificial intelligence, which information is it allowed to connect, and is it really limited only connecting that? Just think of, I would like to get some information out of my organization about a specific topic. Now I'm asking my artificial intelligence, are you aware how this is acting? What is it doing on the second part? So my artificial intelligence is now searching, for example, my Confluence. I'm not allowed to access every part of Confluence. But is the artificial intelligence, and is it do it? Or is it just taking over my profile and only searching with my permissions? Are you able to control it? Are you able to monitor it? And these are the questions. If they arise, we have to act on that. And there are different possibilities doing that. You can do it on an application perspective. We say, my artificial intelligence is acting as an application. I put the responsibility in here. But at least it needs the combination and the connection to your I&IM department in order to combine it, in order to ensure that you're really doing the right things here.
Well, the question if you're going to go for a best of breed or a best of suite is of course a very interesting question. It's one of the hardest as a product lead or a product owner to answer. And I think to answer the question, you need to do two things. First, you need to understand what initiatives is your business really pushing for. What do you need to have in 12 to 18 months? And then try to figure out, because I can guarantee you that a number of the products that you have today are going to say that they have AI capabilities or NHI capabilities. And they're probably right that they can do some things, but can they do enough? Or is the right decision to start up the RFP to buy an NHI product? Very, very hard question to answer, and it's based on what kind of initiatives is your business kind of putting into the starting blocks right now?
I think obviously for me the answer is very clear. This is what we do morning to night. I think, and I think you phrased it very well. We need to look like in a year from now, right? Where will the business be? What will the needs be? If you ask me, I'm a firm believer that we're all in all our enterprises, we're going to have more virtual employees than human employees, and it's going to happen like faster than what we expect. So it's not just the amount, right, of these identities. It's really the complexity of managing them, and we're really in the forefront of this, of looking what does it mean to have an Active Directory for NHIs, what does it mean to have a 2FA for an agent, right? How do we really monitor what it's doing and provisioning it with just the right access and having these controls in place. It's not an easy issue to take, and we cannot really replicate the same technologies that we had, because it's different protocols, different pace, even different processes, really in terms of like the culture and thinking of what kind of management do we want to have on these identity, and how do we integrate them in our existing processes. I think something just to resonate what you said there, we always look about like data exposure, right, and what permissions does it have. Something that we sometimes overlook, which I think is very interesting, and sometimes maybe even more interesting, is the operations that these non-human identities can perform, right? When you look at an AI that you want to send emails on your behalf, right? It can transfer money, it can actually hold production, right? These kind of operations that we enable these identities to perform, sometimes they're even more risky, right? We would want to manage them versus the exposure like of data that we have just from a risk perspective.
I know that it depends on the business, it depends on the organization, but from your experience, what would you say is the main challenge that you've seen that many of these organizations face when it comes to implementing this? Any case study that maybe you could share with us?
Yeah, I can answer that very quick. So, some organizations have some visibility, right? And when I say some visibility, it's in some environments, if it's just cloud or just on-prem or just SaaS, and just a specific type of non-human identities. As an example, we're seeing and we support more than 1,000 types of NHIs today. Sometimes you'll see only service accounts, or only service principals, or user accounts that are used by services, right? Or service accounts that are used by users. Like we're seeing all these kind of different types, if it's certificates, SSH keys, and there's a long list of ways to integrate and connect with the organization. So the first piece is really visibility, and then the hard part is not only getting a complete visibility of what has access to the enterprise, but it's, how do I risk prioritize that, and what do I actually do with it, right? How can I rotate the key? How can I mandate this privilege or a separation of duties, right? How can I enforce a policy? Things like that are really hard to perform, obviously, or sometimes just impossible to perform manually.
I'm very impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, the question. Talking about how this is normally happening is starting not with a non-human identity, it's starting with an identity. A human identity that is asking for functionality, business functionality to make things easier. So the first that you're trying to focus on is getting this function being operative and active. So you say, I would like to have an agent answering my emails. So you're concentrating on the functionality that it is activated and working. And if this is done, you put it live. And then it came to you, I think I forgot something. And this is, what are the capabilities of this identity that is behind that? Have I recognized that? And this is then, from my understanding and from the experience that I have got so far, only on the second glance you're taking care that this aspect is also taken care of. So what we need to influence in our organization is that whenever you're going to do something on the functionality and using artificial intelligence, take care that the second part of it, roles and rights concepts, permissions and all of this stuff, are also be recognized.
If I might have another quick go, so another big problem that we're seeing is around vaults. And sometimes, we have the program say, okay, I got a vault, I got a PAM program, right? And I've got my non-human identities in one place. And the problem with that, the challenge is, how do I know if these secrets are being used outside of the vaults? How do I know if all my secrets are vaulted, right? The vaults it's a good technology as itself, right? The problem is not the vault, the problem is the program and the processes, right? And the people actually adopting it and using it in the right way. So really kind of getting the visibility and understanding, correlating, right? What's vaulted, what's not vaulted, what could be vaulted, and stuff like that is very challenging as well.
Well, I would say that there are two interesting questions that you're gonna be asked in the NHI world. So the first question is, someone comes and says, well, John here has built a lot of stuff for us, but unfortunately he's leaving the organization. Can you make sure that all his access gets cut off? And okay, then you go like, IGA system will cut off his access, that's not a problem. Except that he has created a lot of non-human identities and a lot of entities. How do we make sure that all of those gets moved to new people? And we rotate the password so that the fact that John knows the password is not a problem. So that's the first question where NHI is going to be a very interesting part. The harder question comes in when you get a call at 2 a.m. and saying, we have an intrusion. This identity is compromised. What access do they have? And then you need to do exactly the same thing. The difference is that instead of having a few days or even a few weeks or sometimes in a few months to remove all the access, you have a few hours tops. So this is something you can start. So the advantage of having the visibility is at least you have some kind of ability to answer these questions. Then, of course, you want to put a process in place to actively do all of these cleanup and hygiene and work. Because if you don't, you're probably going to acquire a quite large rucksack quite quickly, especially if your organization is rolling out an AI program and start creating lots and lots of AI credentials.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. I think now it's time to open the floor to the audience. I'll be passing the mic around, so if anyone has a question, now is your chance. Don't be shy. Come on, there must be some question.
Lalit has a question.
There, okay.
Hi. So my context is that I have NHIs in a staging and a production environment. And the problem is that the number of NHIs differs by orders of magnitude, 10 to even 100. Now, do you think this is grounds for placing more emphasis on NHI management or relaxing requirements on NHIs because of the lower sensitivity?
So this is actually a very interesting area, because if you look at the control sets of many enterprises, you have the control set that you want to either keep your staging environment clean from any real data that is related to persons, or you need to implement the same level of security on the staging environment as you have in the production environment. And there is an interesting ongoing discussion right now if this kind of approach is actually mandated by DORA. So if DORA applies to you and you don't have it, then you're probably going to have an audit finding on you soon again. So I would say it depends a little bit on what you keep in your staging environment. Because
Very different. Yeah. Very different from production.
So, but do you have stuff in your staging environment that you need to protect, either because of the data or because of the criticality of being able to run the process? Because if your staging environment is blown away, your ability to develop new software, to patch things, is probably going to be gone. So that is also a little part of the answer. How would you rebuild your staging environment if you get a compromise? And what will be the impact on the business if it happens?
For me, the main concern is exploratory. You can explore the system and gain a lot of internal knowledge. That's the only concern.
So that is, of course, another approach that an attacker could take to go through your staging. And it's happened quite a lot of, if you look at the post-mortem on big attacks, is that going the trip through staging is a quite common way to get into the production system, because somewhere there is some form of a connection to production, or there's some password that lies somewhere where it shouldn't be, or something like that. So I would say that this is a concern, and at least try to figure out what is your organization's risk appetite in this space.
One of the biggest attacks I'm sure we all here heard of was Midnight Blizzard, right, with Microsoft. And that was on a Microsoft environment owned by Microsoft. And the attacker actually got through like a staging environment, hopped into the production environment. In that case, it was an OAuth, right, an OAuth non-human identity. And actually the first thing that the attackers did was actually install another OAuth. So they have a persistent backdoor into the system. So yeah, production environments obviously are our production environments, right? But we shouldn't take our eyes off the staging as well.
We have go ahead.
That's what we're trying to establish. We are setting up a staging that we treat the integration environment as it is a production environment. So we have different possibilities to do with that, but in general, it should be equal from the security level, so that you really can segregate things and have a real separation between these environments, so that you can't pass identities and all of this stuff.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is André. My question is if non-human accounts requires a program, really a program, or is a less complex as a project, because you already have the identity program on the companies. And even with the identity programs, you have IGA, PAN, customer identity programs. but NHI requires a program or is only a project?
I'll answer very quickly from my perspective. So usually we're seeing around 50x non-human identities and human identities. So if you have 1,000 employees, like that would be 50,000 API connections connecting everything to everything. And in the end, this enables access to the enterprise. It's just controlling the exposure. Again, the order of magnitude, the complexity, and the pace in which this is proliferating, especially with AI these days, is crazy. So this is what we're seeing in the market, right? Without a proper program in place, it's kind of getting impossible to manage manually or with existing tools.
I think the answer is firstly, how big of a problem you have, in many cases quite large. Second part of the question is, how do you get the funding to actually address the problem? And there, it may be that the right way to do it is to launch an NHI program. In other organizations, it might be if you launch an NHI program, the first you're going to be asked is, so what business benefit does this bring? So in some cases, attaching it to some form of a transformation, be it DORA, be it, we're entering a new market, therefore needs to improve something, that might be the best way to do it. That's all about how the organization works in the country.
Just to add, I think the challenges with dealing with NHIs is very different to dealing with humans, right? In terms of the risks, hard-coded passwords, monitoring controls, human using the counts. So some of the approaches to fixing the issues around static credentials, right, are very different. So yes, whilst you may use common tool sets, you do need to really treat the NHI problem separately, because it's just too big and it's much bigger than dealing with human access control problems.
Absolutely right. I guess there lies the issue itself. If you already have an appropriate process how to deal with them, I guess you can continue and you don't need the program any longer. But if there's nothing existing at the moment, I guess the program would help you at least to get the first glance of what you need to do.
Now we have time for one more question, but maybe only one person could answer it.
Martin, you're a lucky one. First of all, thank you for sharing your insights. It's been really valuable hearing your basically experience that you guys have. My question is more around, because I think during your discussion you also mentioned that we have to look ahead, we have to look at the business requirements when you start looking to implementing the NHI program. But I guess my question is, how would you approach that with the business in mind? Because I think one of the challenges that we have currently is, if you'd approach a business saying, hey, we're starting a great new NHI program, what do you want? And majority of the time, they will give you what you want, but not necessarily what you need. So how do you balance that with having an effective, secure NHI program, but still usable and valuable to the business?
I think in my experience, it's the two approaches that I've seen working. There's either reactive based on very specific audit findings or similar, and then you can be successful because then you get the funding to do your job. I don't think we're there yet with NHI, so we either wait for it to happen and then we attack it. That's a well-known approach. The other approach is to say, okay, I think there is, at least in some businesses, there is a real sense of urgency that either we get on the AI train or similar trains, or we will have big problems 12, 24, 26 months out. So one approach is to find a best buddy in the business, whoever is going to be responsible for running out the AI program, be it the chief digital officer or similar, and then say, okay, what are you planning to have in place in 12 months, and 18 months, and 4 months, and then try to see, okay, if this is being built, what do we need to have in place from a security perspective and from an IAM perspective?
Okay, thanks Martin. Such a fascinating sort of insight you've given to the audience around how to start implementing an NHI program. I mean, we could talk for hours about this topic, but I think the main message is start to get in front of this, start looking at it, and start planning your approach to tackling this huge problem. So thanks again, Martin, Alon, Jackson, Stephanus, and Alejandro for hosting the session.